The night shift at St. Augustine General Hospital felt thin and stretched like old gauze. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Monitors blinked in sleepy rhythm green lines crawling across black screens. Every few seconds, a soft beep floated through the emergency room, a reminder that somewhere in the building a heart was still keeping time. Riley Quinn sat in the corner of the nurse's station with a chart in her lap and a small bronze coin in her fingers. She rolled it over her knuckles without looking the motions smooth and practiced. Head-down posture, small eyes quietly tracking every movement in the room. The automatic doors at the front of the ER sighed open, then closed again. Cold city air brushed along the tile floors and carried in the smell of rain and exhaust. No one came through. The doors just breathed in and out like something waiting. "Slow night," one of the senior nurses said, propping her feet on the lower rung of a swivel chair. "You can relax, Quinn." Baltimore finally fell asleep. Riley glanced at the wall clock at the empty waiting room at the doors. The coin clicked once against her thumbnail. "That is what they said somewhere else," she answered. The nurse frowned. "Somewhere else?" Riley's pen scratched a final note in the margin of the chart. "Another hospital," she said, "different city." She did not mention sand or dust in her teeth, or the way sirens sounded when they were mounted on armored trucks instead of ambulances. The quiet snapped. A flat, awful tone cut through the low murmur of voices. One monitor in the far bay went from a steady staircase to a straight, accusing line. The overhead speaker barked, "Code Blue, Room 6. The nurse with her feet up flinched. Someone dropped a plastic tray. Riley was already on her feet. Coin disappeared into her pocket, moving with the others toward the sound. By the time she reached the end of the hallway, the code team had taken over. Hands pressing on a chest, voices calling out times and doses. Riley slipped to the edge of the room, checked the oxygen tank, straightened an IV line that had kinked where it joined the patient's arm. No one looked at her twice. She was the new girl, the one you sent for more gauze. The next morning, the ER was busier. Phones ringing, carts rattling early sunlight, pushing against glass doors smudged by too many hands. Riley carried a metal tray stacked with sterile packs toward a supply cabinet. A resident cut across her path with a chart held high. She pivoted to avoid him. The tray clipped the corner of a cart and instruments jumped. The clatter snapped heads around. "Jesus, Quinn," a nurse muttered. "Careful, those are sterile." "Sorry," Riley said. Sorry, I have it." She crouched fast, gathering the runaway scissors and needle holders. Hands steady, eyes down. Her cheeks burned, but her breathing did not change. Dr. Marcus Hale strode out from behind the main desk. 50 sharp jaw, sharp part in his gray hair. The white coat moved around him like armor. He did not help her pick anything up. "This," he said, voice level and caring, "is where people come in on the worst day of their lives, Nurse Quinn. Not a place for practice spills." Riley straightened, holding the tray tight against her chest. "Yes, sir." "You flinch every time the trauma alarm goes off," he continued. "If you cannot handle noise and motion, you are in the wrong building." "Yes, sir," she repeated. He studied her face for a second, searching for something that might look like a backbone. Whatever he was looking for, he did not see it. He turned away, already calling for labs on another patient. At the nurse's station, the others were waiting for her with crooked smiles. "You blink like a rabbit when he talks to you," one of them said. "She is porcelain," another answered. "Pretty, but one drop and she cracks." They handed her the dull tasks automatically. Restock 4 fluid, wipe down carts, run charts upstairs. Quinn nodded and took every order. "I will do better," she said. What they did not notice was the way she moved around equipment without looking, how she never backed herself into a corner. How her eyes flicked to the exits every time the automatic doors exhaled the night. Chaos arrived in the arms of a screaming man. He burst through the front entrance, carrying a toddler tight against his chest. The child's face was purple, mouth open, no sound coming out. A plastic toy was wedged between small teeth. "Help! He is choking. He is choking. Somebody, please." The waiting room emptied. A clerk called for a doctor. A nurse grabbed a suction machine and fumbled with the tubing. Riley was already there. "Set him on the gurney," she said, voice firm and calm. The father obeyed without noticing he had listened. Riley slid her hands under the boy's shoulders, tilted him just enough, 2 fingers along the jaw. Her touch was quick and precise, probing the mouth, then slightly deeper, a movement that looked far too sure for someone who yesterday could not keep a tray upright. The boy's body jerked. A small blue car popped free and bounced once on the mattress. The child sucked in a ragged breath, then another. The color at his lips shifted from purple to a blotchy, angry red. The room exhaled. Someone laughed shakily. The father started to sob. A resident rushed in, chest heaving from his sprint. "What happened?" he asked. "Foreign body relieved manually," Riley said, already checking the boy's vitals, watching the numbers climb on the monitor. The resident stared at her hands. "Where did you learn that?" Riley swallowed. Her eyes flicked up then down. I saw a video, she said, online in Chipsavam. Online, I just remembered. People nodded. That made sense. These days, everything was on the internet. No one wanted to hold on to the idea that a quiet rookie might be something else. Later in room 3, Mr. Alvarez sat on the side of his bed with his hospital gown hanging open at the back and a blood pressure cuff on his arm. 72 brown skin mapped with old tattoos and scar. Riley changed the dressing on his leg with small, efficient movements. She counted under her breath without meaning to a slow cadence for each wrap of gauze. 1001, 1002, 1003. He watched her face. You ever been shot at, Quinn? He asked. She paused, tape in her hand. No, sir. He smiled, showing a gold tooth. Could have fooled me. Your eyes keep checking the ceiling and you blink like you're waiting for incoming. Riley pressed the last strip of tape down and smoothed it with her thumb. Just not used to fluorescent lights, she said. He let it drop, but his gaze stayed thoughtful. At the nurse's station, the television in the corner played a local news channel with the sound turned low. Bright letters crawled along the bottom of the screen. Chemical spill at Harbor Point Labs, 2 injured, 1 critical. A security guard waiting for coffee nodded at the headline. That is the Reed plant, he said to no one in particular. Big guy out there, Jonah Reed. You do not want him in your waiting room. Man once flipped a forklift when somebody mouthed off about his sister. Vosa. The other nurse snorted. Yeah, well, let him try that in here. Riley picked up another chart. Her fingers brushed the edge of the bronze coin in her pocket. The automatic doors at the entrance slid open for a couple coming in with a sprained wrist, then closed again. She watched the doors for one slow breath, listening to the constant, steady beeping behind her, then turned back to work. 2 hours after the news crawl about Harbor Point Labs, the automatic doors sighed open again. This time, they did not close right away. The paramedics came in fast, pushing a gurney streaked with something that had eaten the shine off the metal rails. The smell arrived a second before the sound did. Sharp and sour like burnt plastic and wet pennies. 26 female, the lead EMT called. Exposure to industrial agent, possible blunt trauma from secondary impact. Name is Lily Reed. Vitals are unstable, GCS 12 and dropping. Riley fell into step on the other side of the gurney. The skin on the back of her neck prickled as the chemical scent curled into her nose. It layered itself over the familiar hospital smells, too clean and too wrong at the same time. Lily lay on the stretcher with one arm strapped down. Her hair was matted with some clear gel that had dried patchy on her scalp. Angry red streaks climbed from her collarbone toward her jaw where something had splashed and burned. Her eyes were open but unfocused. Lily, I am Riley? You are at St. Augustine, Riley said as they swung into Trauma 2. You are not alone. A flicker crossed the young woman's face. My brother, she whispered. They called my brother. We will keep you breathing until he yells at us, Riley answered. Dr. Chen appeared at the foot of the bed, snapping on gloves. Quinn, get me a clean line and a full set of vitals. What did she hit? The EMT replied, rattling off the story. There had been a leak, then a burst pipe, then someone had yelled for everyone to run. Lily had not been fast enough. She had been thrown against a metal console, then dragged out by the co-workers while alarms howled. While they spoke, Riley slid a blood pressure cuff into place, clipped a pulse oximeter onto Lily's finger, watched the monitor climb toward life again. 91%. That would do for now. The chemical smell sat heavy in the air. It reached back into a place Riley usually kept locked. Canvas tents, rubber suits, a training instructor's voice describing nerve agents while slides clicked across a wall. Her hands kept moving. BP is 90/56, she reported. Heart rate 122. Respiration shallow 28. Burns are partial thickness across the upper chest and neck. Possible closed head injury pupils reactive and equal for now. Dr. Chen nodded and began his exam. Nurses slipped IV lines into place, hung saline, prepared analgesics. Lily clenched her teeth as a bandage lifted a short, sharp sound that cut straight through the noise of the room. Out in the waiting area, the sound was different. The TV still showed talking heads and looping footage of flashing lights at the Harbor Point gate, but the volume was off. There were only a handful of people in plastic chairs. An old woman with a walker, a teenager clutching a towel against a sprained ankle, a man in a stained work jacket who paced instead of sitting, fists opening and closing. Jonah Reed had grease ground into the lines of his hands. His shirt was half-buttoned and smudged with something dark where he had wiped his palms. He stood with his shoulders hunched up as if the ceiling had dropped 2 inches and he was trying not to touch it. The security guard from before approached him. Sir, you need to let the staff do their job. They will come talk to you as soon as they can. Jonah did not look away from the hallway that led to the trauma bays. She is in there, he asked. Your sister is being treated. You cannot go back there right now. Someone called the guard's name from across the room, asking for help with a drunk patient. He hesitated, then stepped away, leaving Jonah with only the muted television and the buzz of the vending machine for company. In Trauma 2, Lily lay very still while a nurse wrapped new dressings. The pain medicine had softened the lines around her eyes, but her jaw clenched each time someone moved her shoulder. "You said you called my brother," she murmured again. "Yes," Riley said. "He is in the waiting room. He knows you are here." "He is going to scare everyone," Lily said. "He looks worse than he is." Riley smiled a little. "I will keep him out of trouble." Lily tried to smile back, then bit it off as a bolt of pain ran through her. When the door closed behind Riley, the hallway felt colder. She stripped off her gloves and dropped them in the bin. For a moment, she leaned against the wall, letting her shoulders sag before she rolled them back and stood straight. At the nurse's station, charts had begun to stack again. Phones rang. A baby cried somewhere behind a curtain. "Quinn!" One of the nurses jerked her chin toward the front. "You might want to see this." The automatic doors at the entrance opened. This time a giant walked in. He filled the doorway in a way that made the glass panels seem fragile. Jonah Reed stepped into the light of the ER chest, heaving eyes wild. His gaze swept the waiting room, once ignoring the clerk calling his name, and fixed on the hall where Lily had disappeared. Riley saw the change in him the moment the sound came. From down the corridor, a raw cry tore its way out of Trauma 2. It was not long. It was one ragged syllable, but it carried pain and fear and the memory of too many alarms. "Lily." Jonah moved. He did not run in a straight line. He barreled. Chairs scraped aside. One of them toppled and clattered across the tile. A child started to wail as their mother yanked them out of his path. "Sir, you cannot go back there," the clerk shouted. A security guard lunged in front of him and caught his arm. "Need you to calm down, sir. You stop right here, you hear me." Jonah shook him off with one violent twist. The guard stumbled, hit the edge of a plastic chair, and went down hard. The second guard rushed in from the side, arms wide, trying to herd Jonah toward the wall. Jonah's shoulder slammed into him, and the man bounced away like he had hit a moving truck. "Security to the emergency department," someone yelled into a radio. "Now!" The automatic doors wheezed as if they wanted to close again and could not. Jonah charged down the main hallway toward the trauma bays, boots pounding. His breath sounded harsh and wet in his own ears. He could still hear Lily screaming in the lab and the ambulance now behind a door where he was not allowed. Nobody was going to keep him from her. Riley stepped away from the nurse's station. She had seen men move like that before. Not in work boots, not in a hospital, but with the same absolute focus, and the same blind tunnel through fear. She slid her fingers into her pocket and closed them around the coin. The metal was warm from the heat of her palm. She let herself feel it for one breath, then took her hand out empty. "Quinn, stay back," one of the nurses hissed. She did not answer. Jonah bore down on the entrance to Trauma 2. Another nurse flattened herself against the wall with a tray of instruments clattering in her hands. Riley walked into his path. "Mr. Reed," she said, voice clear, "you need to stop." He saw her as a blur in his way, a small person in blue scrubs between him and the door with his sister behind it. "Move," he roared. His arm swung out. His hand was open, but the force behind it would have thrown her into the nearest wall. Riley did not retreat. She stepped in. Her left hand snapped to his wrist, her right hand slid to the crook of his elbow. Every muscle in her body knew the movement before her mind caught up. She let the weight of him tip forward, then dropped her own weight low, pivoting on the ball of her foot. The floor tilted. For Jonah, the ceiling swung into his vision in a rush of white light and metal beams. His feet left the ground. There was a brief, weightless moment, then his back met the tile with a blunt crack that shuddered up through his ribs. The sound echoed down the hall. Riley landed on one knee beside him, keeping his arm locked and his head turned away from the corner of a nearby cart. She felt the impact of his body through her own bones, absorbed it, and let it die there. The hallway went silent for a second. Even the monitors seemed to hold their breath. Jonah lay on the floor chest, heaving eyes wide with shock more than pain. He tried to twist, but the hold on his arm and shoulder iced his muscles in place. "Do not fight me," Riley said low but calm. "If you fight me, you might hit your head. Your sister needs you conscious, not concussed." A circle of faces edged closer. Nurses. A resident. The guards dragging themselves back to their feet. Dr. Hale appeared at the end of the hall, tie askew, eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. "Explain," he said. Riley checked Jonah's airway with her free hand, then his pulse. "He was going to breach a sterile trauma room," she said. "He is stable, no head impact. I recommend soft restraints and sedation for acute distress." Hale stared at her for a long moment. "That throw," he said quietly. "Where did you learn that, Nurse Quinn?" Riley released pressure a little so Jonah could breathe easier, but she did not let go of his arm until one of the guards knelt to take her place. "In another city," she said. Her voice did not shake. Her hands were steady when she stood and stepped back. Behind the closed door of trauma, a monitor began to beep again, steady and insistent, pulling everyone's attention for a heartbeat. Then the phones started ringing at the nurses' station, louder and closer together than before. The phones did not stop ringing. At the nurses' station, 3 lines lit up at once. One nurse grabbed a handset, then another, voices overlapping, eyes sharpening at whatever they heard on the other end. Dr. Hale was still halfway down the hall when the overhead speakers crackled. "Attention all emergency staff. Mass casualty alert. Multi-vehicle collision on Interstate 95. Estimated 15 critical patients, multiple pediatrics. Repeat, mass casualty alert." The room seemed to tilt for a moment, as if the building had taken a breath and did not know how to let it out. "Of course," someone murmured. Hale reached the station and snatched a phone from its cradle. "This is Dr. Hale," he said. "How many red tags? How many kids? How far out?" Riley stood a few steps away. Her scrubs were creased from where Jonah's shoulder had dragged against them. She could still feel the echo of his weight in her arms. The coin in her pocket pressed against her hip, solid, familiar. The clerk on the phone rattled numbers into Hale's ear. His jaw tightened. 15 total. 7 under 12, he repeated low. 2 intubated in the field, 3 trapped. "They are sending us first wave in 10 minutes. 10 minutes was nothing in an ER that was already scattered. The trauma bays were full. Lily in one room with her burns and chemical exposure, an older man with a heart attack in another, a teenager with a shattered wrist in a third. "Clear whatever you can," Hale snapped. "Move stable patients to hall beds. Call upstairs for any open ICU or step-down beds. We need space." The nurses sprang into motion, pushing beds, unhooking monitors, apologizing to patients as they rolled them into corridors. A blood pressure cuff popped loose and skidded under a chair. A portable monitor wailed as its cord came free. For a second, the whole department felt like a house mid-earthquake, objects sliding out of place before they could be caught. Riley watched it all, eyes ticking across the whiteboard where names and room numbers crowded each other. The sound in her head changed. The overhead speakers dropped away. In their place came the remembered thud of rotor blades and the far-off crack of something that was not thunder. The coin was still in her pocket. She pressed her fingers against it. One breath in, one out. The world came back in sharp focus. She stepped closer to the board and picked up a dry erase marker. "Stop," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it carried. 3 people turned. Hale looked up from the phone. "We are not going to shove bodies into corners and hope," Riley said. "We will choke ourselves before they get here." Hale opened his mouth. The words that wanted to come were already there, the old reflex to shut her down. Instead, he heard himself ask, "What do you suggest, Nurse Quinn?" She circled 2 names on the board. "Move any green tag out of the department completely," she said. "Chairs family waiting area lobby if we have to. Keep them monitored by 1 nurse with a portable cart. Yellow tags to the back hall. We need trauma 1, 2, and 3 open. Resus bays clear for pediatric criticals." One of the senior nurses frowned. "We do not have enough staff to keep eyes on all of those kids if we split like that." Riley shook her head. "We are not splitting by room. We are splitting by skill. Put your fastest IV starters in the ambulance bay. They tag and stick before the beds, cross the threshold. Anyone with good hands but slower charting can run the hall. Residents float." She pointed without thinking. "Chen, take trauma 1 and 3. Focus on airway and abdominals. Cole, you are in charge of imaging calls and blood bank. You do not leave that phone." Cole bristled. "I do not answer phones." "Tonight you do," Riley said. "You are the only one who knows every attending on call by name. Use that." For a second it looked like he might argue. Then he saw Hale watching him and he swallowed it. "Fine," he said. "Fine." Hale rubbed his forehead. "Quinn, you cannot just assign doctors," he began. "Somebody has to," she answered. "The ambulances are not going to wait while we vote on it." The overhead speaker announced the first wave. "EMS inbound 3 minutes out. Prepare to receive." The automatic doors at the front of the ear opened. This time there were sirens behind them. The ambulance bay filled with red and blue flashes. Engines idled, exhaust curling white in the cold air. The first truck backed in, then a second doors flung wide before they had fully stopped. Riley jogged to the edge of the concrete, snapping on a fresh pair of gloves. "Give me a quick story before you roll," she told the nearest paramedic. "Male, 8 years old," the EMT said. Walking the stretcher fast. Chest bruising, diminished breath sounds on the right, SATs dropping on transport. Seatbelt mark across the neck. "Trauma 2, Riley ordered. Straight line for Resus." The next gurney almost collided with the first. "Female 69, hypotensive, possible abdominal, bleed seatbelt. Sign, rigid belly, BP tanking." Riley shifted her weight. "Trauma 1, start a second line in the bay. Hang blood as soon as type-specific hits." She did not look at Hale to see whether he agreed. Her focus had narrowed to the flow of bodies, the direction of wheels and boots and gloved hands. Inside monitors began to sing a messy chorus. Blood pressure cuffs hissed. Someone cursed as an IV infiltrated and had to be restarted. In Trauma 1, the older woman's chest rose unevenly. Her lips had a gray edge that did not belong to the fluorescent light. A resident lifted the stethoscope from her ribs and frowned. "Breath sounds are absent on the left," he said. He reached for the ultrasound machine, fumbling with the probe. Riley leaned over the bed. The woman's neck veins were distended. The trachea sat a little off-center. "Drop the ultrasound," Riley said. "She does not have that kind of time." The resident blinked. "What do you mean?" "Tension pneumothorax," Riley replied. "We fix the pressure first, we confirm later." She snatched the large bore needle from the tray, wiped a quick line of antiseptic across the chest, and slid the needle in between ribs, precise and sure. For one taut second, nothing happened. Then air hissed out sharp and angry. The woman's chest rose more evenly on the next breath. The monitor showed her oxygen saturation creeping up. The resident stared at the angle of the needle. "How did you know you were off by just a few millimeters?" he asked. "I did not miss," she said. "Hold this here until surgery can see her." In the next bay, a small boy cried weakly while a nurse tried to place an IV in a vein that kept rolling away. His hair was stuck to his forehead with sweat. His hands were cold and damp. Riley squeezed his shoulder once as she passed. "You are safe," she said. "You keep yelling, that is a good sign." The noise folded around her and settled into a pattern. Calls for lab results, requests for more hands. The low, steady warning tone of a pressure monitor refusing to budge. Another stretcher squeaked down the hall, its wheels leaving faint streaks of wet rubber. 7-year-old female, the paramedic said, rushing the words. Unrestrained rear seat. Head trauma blown, pupil on the right. On scene, lost pulses 5 minutes out, regained after 1 round of CPR and EPI. The child on the bed looked very small under the straps. Blood clumped in her hair. Dried streaks ran down across her ear and into the hollow of her neck. There was a pink plastic bracelet still on her wrist, smeared with dirt. They moved her into the last open rhesus bay. The team swarmed her. Airway, chest, lines. Orders snapped past in a tight rhythm. BP is 60/30, a nurse called. Push fluids, the attending said. Get a cross-match. Riley stood at the foot of the bed and watched the monitor. The green line shuddered, slowed, flattened. The sound changed to a long, unbroken tone. The room hesitated. Start compressions, the attending barked. Hands took position on the child's sternum and began to push. 1, 2, 3, 4. Ribs gave under the force. The little body bounced with each thrust. Riley's vision flickered. The walls of the ER dissolved into canvas. The floor became packed, dusty earth. The lights overhead turned into a strip of desert sky, bleached and uncaring. The smell of blood mixed with cordite and diesel. Someone shouted her name, not here, somewhere else. "Quinn, we are losing him. We do not have a bird for another 20 minutes. Another monitor sounded its flat, accusing tone. Another body much too still. "We are out of time." Her hands remembered the feeling of compressions deep and fast, on a chest that did not rise again. The weight of failure had followed her onto every plane home. In the present, the attending looked at the wall clock. "Been asystolic for over a minute," he said. "We have already given epi. No response." His voice softened just a little. "Time of death, 1943. His hand started to reach for the chart. Riley heard her own voice before she had decided to use it. "No." The word landed in the room like a dropped instrument. "Quinn," the attending said, "we are done here." Riley stepped closer to the bed. "Her perfusion time is still inside the window," she said. "We are not done." "You are a nurse," he snapped. "You do not call codes." Riley looked at him. For a brief moment, the mask she wore every day slipped. Her eyes were not soft. They were very sharp and very cold. "I am the only one in this room who knows what it looks like when you quit too early," she said. She moved to the child's side and placed her hands over the small sternum. "Switch out," she told the nurse who had been doing compressions. "You are tired. I am not." The nurse stepped back without arguing. Riley began compressions. Deeper. Faster. Not sloppy, but with a precision born from countless repetitions. Her shoulders lined up over her wrists. Every push drove straight down. "Epi again," she said. "Weight-based, not rounded down." The attending hesitated, then nodded at the medication nurse. "Do not give her an adult dose," he said. "I know exactly what I am doing," Riley answered. Her voice had changed. It carried the same tone she had used in the ambulance bay, the one that made people move, whether they agreed or not. The medication went in. The clock on the wall ticked. The long tone of the flatline kept going. Riley focused on the feel of the chest under her hands. She shut out the noise around her. Somewhere in the back of her mind, the memory of the desert monitor faded. There was only this one. "Come on," she murmured. She was not sure whether she spoke to the heart or to herself. "You are not done." Her arms started to burn, her palms ached. She did not slow. The monitor skipped. A tiny blip appeared on the line, then vanished. "Hold compressions," the attending said. Riley did not stop. "Hold," he repeated louder. She pushed through 5 more compressions, then lifted her hands. The green line flickered. It dipped, dipped again. A weak, irregular rhythm crawled across the screen. "There," Riley said quietly. The attending stepped closer, eyes narrowed. "Sinus rhythm returning," he said, weak but present. The nurse by the head of the bed let out a breath that sounded like a sob. Someone else laughed once, half wild. Riley did not move away until she saw the numbers stabilize. Heart rate. Blood pressure inching up from nothing. "You pushed lidocaine without my order," the attending said, his voice low. "And you overrode my call time." Sweat slid from Riley's temple down along her jaw. She wiped it away with her wrist, not taking her eyes off the child. "The protocol was not working," she said. "She is still here. That is all that matters right now." Outside the rhesus bay in the main path of the ER, Dr. Evelyn Park stood with a chart in her hand. She had arrived partway through the wave and had been watching more than she had been talking. Through the glass, she had seen Riley run the ambulance intake like a field triage line. She had heard the orders about airway first, about who to send straight to CT and who to hold. She had watched the tension pneumothorax needle go in without a tremor. Now she watched the way Riley stood between the child and anyone who tried to give up. A younger surgeon beside her shook his head. "That new nurse is trouble," he muttered. "Did you see her tell Patel no?" Dr. Park did not answer right away. Her gaze stayed on Riley. "I saw a combat medic run a forward surgical team in Kandahar once," she said quietly. "He looked like that." The surgeon frowned. "Like what?" "Like the room was a battlefield and he knew exactly where every bullet would land," she said. "Quinn is not built for civilian medicine, not only that." She closed the chart in her hand. "She is overqualified for this whole department." Inside the bay, Riley reached up and adjusted the child's oxygen mask with a gentleness that did not match the force she had used moments before. The beeping of the monitor settled into a fragile but steady pattern. The chaos of the ER swirled around her again, louder than ever yet. For a heartbeat, the space where she stood felt almost still. By the time the last ambulance pulled away from the bay, the sky over Baltimore was turning the color of dishwater. A tired gray seeped into the windows, washing out the harsh edges of the air lights. The department looked like a room that had survived something it should not have. Gauze wrappers littered the floor. An empty blood bag lay crumpled under a cart. The smell in the air was a heavy mix of antiseptic sweat and metal. The monitors still beeped, but their rhythm had shifted from frantic to exhausted. Riley stood at the sink and scrubbed dried blood from the backs of her hands. It was not her blood, and not all of it was from the same person. Her shoulders ached. Her fingers trembled only when there was nothing left to hold. She pulled a paper towel from the dispenser and dried her hands. When she pressed her palm against her pocket, she felt the round shape of the coin an anchor in the drifting. In recess, the little girl whose heart had stopped lay under a warmed blanket. Her hair had been washed enough to loosen the clotted blood. A nurse sat at her side, chart open on her lap. The monitor above the bed showed a small, steady rhythm. Riley watched through the glass for a second, long enough to see the numbers hold. Then she turned away. In his office at the end of the hall, Dr. Marcus Hale sat with the door closed and the blinds half drawn. The overhead light was off. The glow from his computer screen painted the room in a cold rectangle. On the monitor, a security camera feed looped silently. It showed Jonah Reed exploding across the waiting room, the failed attempts to stop him, and a small woman in blue scrubs stepping into his path. Hale watched Riley's body pivot, watched the giant's feet leave the floor. He rewound it twice. On the third replay, he closed the window and opened another. The phone on his desk was still warm from the call he had placed 20 minutes earlier to a number he had not dialed in years. A friend from medical school who had taken a different path and now worked somewhere behind the alphabet of agencies in Washington. "I need a background check on one of my nurses," he had said. He had given Riley's full name and date of birth. The line had gone quiet in a way that did not feel like static. Now a file lay open on his screen. Half the text was hidden under thick black bars. Name Quinn Riley A. Branch United States Army. Unit 75th Ranger Regiment attached as combat medic. Location of service multiple deployments including Kandahar Province. Commendation for actions during an ambush in an urban district, credit for saving 32 lives, both military and civilian. Casualties 2 friendly KIA due to delayed extraction. Notes, symptoms consistent with moral injury. Recommended removal from combat zone. Honorable discharge granted upon request. A photograph stared back at him from the corner of the page. Riley in uniform, hair tucked up under her cap, jaw set, eyes level with the camera. No flinching there. No porcelain. Hale leaned back in his chair and rubbed at the bridge of his nose. He remembered the way he had spoken to her on her first day. The way he had used her for menial tasks, the way he had told her there was no place for softness in his department. He had been wrong about what was soft. The knock at the door was soft too. "Come in," he said. Dr. Evelyn Park stepped inside, still in her wrinkled scrubs, a coffee cup in her hand. She closed the door behind her with her foot. "You look better in the dark," she said. He glanced up. "Long night," he replied. "I saw the rhesus on the 7-year-old," Park said, "and the tension pneumo in Bay 1, and the triage line in the ambulance bay." Hale studied her face. "You have an opinion," he said. "I have several," she answered. "Most of them include the name Quinn." He turned the monitor slightly so she could see the file. Her eyes skimmed the lines, the blacked-out paragraphs, the photograph. Park let out a low whistle. "Rangers," she said. "That explains the way she moves." "She never mentioned it," Hale muttered. "Would you have listened if she had?" Park asked. He did not answer. She sipped her coffee. "You going to pretend you did not see this?" she asked, nodding at the screen. "Or are you going to figure out what to do with a combat medic hiding in scrubs?" Before he could reply, the overhead speaker crackled again. "Rapid Response Trauma 2, the voice announced. "Repeat Rapid Response Trauma 2. Hale and Park were already moving before the words finished. Trauma 2 was Lily Reed's room. When they reached the doorway, the air inside felt different. Charged. Lily lay on the bedskin slick with sweat. Her cheeks had lost color. The burns across her chest looked angrier, but that was not what set alarms ringing in Riley's head. Her pupils had shrunk to tiny dots. Saliva pooled at the corners of her mouth. Her breathing sounded wet. Every muscle along her jaw and neck twitched in small, frightening ripples. A nurse was trying to suction her airway, muttering about secretions. The resident on duty stood near the foot of the bed, flipping through her chart. "Her pressure is dropping," he said. "Could be internal bleeding we missed. Maybe the scans did not show everything. We should prep her for exploratory laparotomy. Or this could be a reaction to the pain meds and sedation," another suggested. "Or progression of her blunt trauma." Riley did not hear them as separate voices. It was all one current pulling in the wrong direction. The smell in the room had changed. Beneath the usual notes of alcohol and plastic and burned skin, there was something else now. A faint, sickly sweetness mixed with metal. It wrapped around the back of her tongue exactly the way it had on a training field years ago, when instructors had cracked open sealed vials and asked them to learn with their noses. Her throat tightened. Her hands did not hesitate. "She is not bleeding out," Riley said. Head snapped toward her. The resident frowned. "You want to repeat that?" he asked. Riley stepped closer to the bed. "Look at her," she said. "Pinpoint pupils. Bronchorrhea, fasciculations, bradycardia. Her lungs are filling with fluid and her heart is slowing down. This is a cholinergic toxidrome. This is not just industrial solvent. She was exposed to an organophosphate or something close." The room went very still for a beat. "We do not have confirmation of that," the resident said. "We have not gotten tox screens back. And even if you are right, that is above your level to call. If we wait for tox screens, she will be dead before the printer warms up," Riley said. Dr. Park slipped in beside Hale at the door. She met Riley's eyes across the room and saw the way they had gone flat and hard. "What are you proposing?" Hale asked. Riley did not look away from Lily. "Atropine 2 milligrams IV, she said. Then preladoxim as soon as pharmacy can send it. Support her airway and watch her secretions. We treat the pattern, not the paperwork." The resident shook his head. "That dose of atropine could push her heart rate dangerously high if you are wrong," he argued. "She does not have a heart rate to spare," Riley answered. "She is already sliding into respiratory failure." A monitor behind Lily began to beep a warning. Her pulse oximeter dipped below 90. The wet sound in her lungs grew louder. Hale felt the weight of every eye in the room shift between him and Riley. "How sure are you?" he asked her. Riley's voice did not waver. "I have smelled this before," she said. "I have seen this exact pattern before. Overseas. In training and in real time. She has 30 seconds of good brain perfusion left if we do nothing. 30 seconds. Hale imagined Jonah sedated somewhere down the hall, waking up to find his sister gone because Hale had needed more proof. He nodded once. "Get atropine," he said, "now, and get pharmacy to send praladoxime. Mark it stat level 1 priority." The nurse at the medication cart moved so fast the drawer banged open. A syringe found Riley's hand. She checked the label, drew back the plunger to confirm dose, then slid the needle into Lily's IV line. "Saline flush," she ordered. The medication chased itself into Lily's bloodstream. For a moment, nothing changed. Then the twitching along her jaw eased. The flood of saliva slowed. Her chest expanded a little more with each breath. The heart monitor, which had been flirting with the low 50s, crept upward. The room exhaled as one. "Keep suctioning," Riley said. "We are not clear yet. Atropine will dry some of it, but we need to clear her lungs. As soon as praladoxime arrives, we administer and repeat per protocol." The resident stared at Lily, then at Riley. You were right, he said. Riley did not answer him. Her hand hovered over Lily's shoulder close enough to feel the warmth of her skin not quite touching the bandages. Behind her, Hale watched the numbers on the monitor rise towards something livable. He also watched Riley's posture, the way she boxed herself around the bed as if daring the room to argue. He felt the file on his computer screen like a weight in his pocket. An hour later, Jonah Reed woke up in a quiet room with a soft restraint biting into his wrist. The sedative fog burned off in a rush of panic. He yanked at the strap until it creaked. Easy, the security guard at the door said. You are safe. Your sister is still here. The doctors are working on her. Jonah's breath came rough. I need to see her, he said. You will get a minute, the guard replied, if you stay calm. Calm is not what I do, Jonah muttered, but his hands loosened. They walked him down the hall with 2 guards flanking him. The ER looked different in the thin morning light. Less like a place that could swallow him whole, more like a place that had barely held together. Outside Trauma 2, Jonah stopped. Through the small window, he saw Lily lying on the bed. There were more tubes than before, but her face looked less tight. Her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. The monitor above her head sang a soft, regular beep. Riley stood at the bedside checking the drip rate on an IV. Her shoulders sagged for a second when she thought no one was watching. Jonah knocked once on the glass. Riley looked up. The guards moved as if to block him, but Hale's voice came from behind them. Let him in, he said. They stepped aside. Jonah entered the room suddenly careful with his size. He stood next to Lily and stared at her until his throat worked. She is okay, Riley said quietly. She was hit by more than just heat and force. Something in that lab was toxic in ways we do not test for in the ER. We treated it. Jonah swallowed. They said she crashed, he said. That they thought she was bleeding inside, that she was seizing. Then someone said your name. Riley watched Lily's fingers curl slightly around the blanket. She tried very hard to stop breathing, Riley said. We did not let her. Jonah turned to look at her fully. Up close, he seemed even larger, but there was nothing of a monster in his expression now. Only fear that had been given somewhere to go. People usually see me and think I am the problem, he said. You did not look at me like that. Riley remembered his first charge down the hall, the way his face had twisted not in rage, but in pure terror. You were not trying to hurt us, she said. You were trying to get to her. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small flattened circle of metal on a leather thong. The coin was dull silver edges, worn letters stamped into one side. I make these in my shop, he said. For my crew. For people who walk into fires, they do not have to. He held it out. The word on the coin was simple. Stay. Riley hesitated. I cannot take that, she said. You already did more than anyone ever has for us, Jonah replied. You threw me on my back without breaking me. You kept her here when she wanted to quit. You do not get to say no. She closed her fingers around the coin. It was heavier than the one in her scrub pocket, different metal, different history. The old coin had been given to her for surviving. This one felt like something else entirely. Thank you, she said. Jonah nodded once. If anyone in this place gives you trouble, he said quietly, you tell me. I owe you more than one favor. He looked back at his sister, at the steady rise and fall of her chest, then stepped out of the room to let the machines keep singing their thin, insistent song. In the doorway, Hale watched Riley tuck the new coin into her pocket beside the old one, 2 small circles of metal resting against the same heart. The break room smelled like bad coffee and microwave leftovers. The fluorescent light hummed louder here like it was tired too. Riley stood at the counter stirring powdered creamer into a chipped mug. Her shoulders were rounded with the kind of weariness that did not come from one night, but her hands were steady. The new coin Jonah had given her sat flat on the table near her elbow, the word stay, catching a slice of light. Dr. Nathan Cole walked in without looking around. He dropped a stack of charts on the table so hard that a few pages slid free. There you are, he said. Riley glanced over her shoulder. You need something signed, she asked. He let out a sharp laugh. What I need is this department to remember how it works, he said. You are a nurse. You do not get to run codes, you do not assign residents, and you do not decide which drugs we use off protocol. Riley set the spoon down carefully. The metal touched the counter with a small tap. I did not have time to ask permission, she said. People were dying in front of us. People die here every night, Cole snapped. That does not mean you get to play hero. You undermined my authority, you humiliated an attending, and you put this hospital at risk. There will be reviews, there will be questions. Do you even understand what liability is? She turned to face him fully. The mask she wore in front of patients, the soft half-smile in the lowered eyes, was gone. In his place was something quieter and far less breakable. In the places I worked before this, Riley said liability was a body count. Cole blinked. Do not throw war stories at me, he said. That might impress Hale, but it does nothing for me. I have not thrown anything at you, she said, yet. Her tone did not rise. If anything, it dropped. I came here to be small, she went on. To take vitals and hang fluids and go home and pretend the worst thing that could happen was a missing lab slip. She took a step closer. Cole had to tilt his head a little to keep eye contact. Last night, 9 people are still breathing because I used skills I swore I would never use again, she said. I did not overrule procedure to show off. I did it because I knew exactly how long we had. I watched 2 friends run out of that time once. I am not doing that again. Cole opened his mouth, then shut it. His fingers flexed on the back of the chair. You do not scare me, he said. Good, Riley answered. You are not the one I am trying to keep alive. He took a breath as if to retort, but the doorway darkened. Jonah Reed filled the frame, one hand wrapped around the edge of the door. His other hand still had the red marks from the restraints faint, but visible against his skin. He took in the scene in a heartbeat. Cole, Riley, the coin on the table. Am I interrupting? Jonah asked. His voice was quiet, but it carried the memory of a roar. This is a staff area, Cole said. Family is not supposed to be back here. Jonah stepped into the room. The space seemed to shrink. I heard my sister's name, he said. And then I heard someone raising their voice at the person who kept her breathing. Cole's throat moved. This is hospital business, he said. You do not understand the protocols involved. What I understand, Jonah said, is that Lily's heart stopped trying and this woman did not. Twice. He nodded toward Riley. I have worked around men who think yelling makes them important, Jonah went on. You remind me of some of them. Cole's face flushed. You cannot threaten me, he said. I am not threatening you, Jonah replied. I am telling you where I stand. If you try to push her out because she did too much, I will make sure everyone in the city knows that the man who saved his own skin wanted to fire the one who saved 9 lives. Silence settled around the table like dust. Riley picked up the stay coin and slipped it back into her pocket. Enough, she said. Dr. Cole has a point. Cole turned to her, startled. I do, he said. You do, she repeated. There will be reviews. There should be. People broke protocol last night. I was one of them. She held his gaze. If after all that this hospital decides it does not want someone like me here, I will go. The corner of her mouth twitched. I am good at leaving. Before Cole could reply, an overhead chime sounded, followed by a voice. All ER staff mandatory meeting in conference room B in 10 minutes, the speaker announced. Attendance required. Cole gathered his charts with a jerk. This is not over, he muttered. No, Riley said softly. It is not. The conference room was too small for the number of people who pushed into it. Folding chairs scraped the floor. Coffee cups were clutched like talismans. The air was thick with sweat and cheap deodorant and the sharp edge of anticipation. Nurses lined one wall. Residents clustered near the back. Techs, clerks. Security guards, including the one Jonah had knocked over hours before. Jonah himself stood in the corner in borrowed scrubs that were a size too small shoulders crowding the fire extinguisher cabinet. He had refused to go home until someone formally told him Lily was safe. Riley sat in a chair near the back row, as close to the door as possible. Both coins weighed her pockets down. She kept her hands folded in her lap so no one would see them shake. Dr. Hale moved to the front of the room and put his palms on the lectern. He did not have any notes. He cleared his throat once. Last night he said this department was hit with a mass casualty incident that pushed us past our limits. We did not break. A murmur moved through the room. Pride. Reluctant agreement. Exhaustion. Hale's jaw worked. We did not break in part because a member of the staff did things I did not ask her to do, he continued. Things I would not have permitted if she had told me ahead of time. He let his eyes find Riley in the crowd. Nurse Riley Quinn, he said, please stand. She stayed seated for a second, wishing the floor would open. Then she pushed herself up. Every head turned. When Quinn joined us, Hale said, I saw someone who flinched at alarms and dropped instruments. I saw someone soft, someone fragile, someone who did not belong in a place where people die in front of you. His voice roughened. I was wrong. A few chairs creaked as people shifted. I used my authority to keep her in the safest corners of this department, he went on. Stacking trays, stocking fluids. I called that mentoring. What it really was fear and prejudice. He took a breath. Riley Quinn is not porcelain. She is a former staff sergeant in the United States Army, a combat medic with the 75th Ranger Regiment. She has more frontline trauma experience than anyone else in this room, including me. A low ripple spread across the group. Someone swore under their breath. Someone else whispered, that explains a lot. Hale did not look away from Riley. Last night she ran our ambulance intake like a forward triage line, he said. She spotted a tension pneumothorax before a scan could be loaded. She revived a child we were ready to call. She identified a chemical exposure pattern the rest of us missed, and directed the antidote that kept a young woman in trauma too alive. He swallowed. I questioned her judgment. I questioned her place here. I was wrong about both. He stepped away from the lectern closer to the rows of chairs. This hospital cannot pretend we live in a world where gunshots and chemical spills and mass crashes are rare enough to ignore, he said. We need people who know how to move when the room turns into something that looks a lot like a war zone. He let the words sit there. As of this morning, he said St. Augustine General is forming a Tactical Medical Action Team, TMAT, a unit that will train all of us in high-threat incident response, de-escalation, and field-level life-saving measures. He let his gaze sweep the room. There is only one person in this building qualified to lead that team, he said. Riley Quinn. I am asking her to take the position of Director of Tactical Medical Training. The room went very quiet. Then in the back corner, Jonah started clapping. The sound was slow at first. One man in borrowed scrubs' huge hands coming together with deliberate force. The nurse he had knocked over earlier joined in, then another. The sound spread, folding over itself until it filled every corner of the room. Riley felt her face heat. She did not sit. She also did not smile. Her throat was too tight. When the applause ebbed, Hale looked at her again. I owe you a public apology, he said. I am sorry I tried to keep you small. Riley licked her lips. The words she carried did not want to come out in front of all these eyes. Can we talk somewhere else? She asked. Hale nodded. They met in his office an hour later. The blinds were open this time. Sunlight caught the dust in the air and turned it into a slow drifting storm. Riley sat on the edge of the chair facing his desk. She held the old coin from her ranger days in one hand and the new one from Jonah in the other. You know more about me than anyone in this building now, she said. I know enough, Hale replied. The rest is yours. She rolled the ranger coin between her fingers. I left because of 2 names, she said. 2 men who trusted me to keep them alive. We got pinned down in a street that did not have a name on any of our maps. I got most of them out. Not all. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. I watched their mothers cry on a video call, she said. I watched their names go up on a wall. Every time I pulled someone back after that, I only saw the ones I could not reach. She looked up. I came here because I thought if I made myself small enough, no one would ever hand me that kind of responsibility again, she said. If I messed up a dosage or a discharge, I could fill out a form and fix it. Nobody would die in a ditch because I was not fast enough. Haley listened without interrupting. There were grooves at the corners of his eyes that had not been there last year. You have a skill set the rest of us do not have, he said finally. You did not ask for it, but you earned it. You can keep more people alive when everything falls apart. She gave a short, humorless laugh. And that means what she asked. That means you do not get to bury it, he said. You do not owe me. You do not owe this hospital. You owe the living. And maybe the dead too, if you believe in that kind of balance. Riley stared at the coins in her hands. I do not know if I can carry a whole team, she said. Command is heavy. You have already been carrying us, Hale said. We were too proud to notice. He leaned forward. If you take this, it will be on your terms, he said. You tell us what protocols to change. You tell us how to train security. You tell us when I am in the way, and I will move. She looked out the window. From here she could see a sliver of the ambulance bay. A truck backed in, lights off now, just another vehicle. What if I say no, she asked. Then I go back in that room and tell them I could not convince the best medic I have ever seen to stay, Hale said. And then I spend the rest of my time here wondering how many people might have walked out who did not. The words sat between them. Riley closed her fingers around both coins until their edges bit into her skin. Fine, she said, I will do it. She lifted her eyes. But we do it right, she added. Tiamat is not a badge. It is training drills, new ways of talking to people like Jonah before they hit a boiling point. Security learns how to put someone on the floor without breaking their neck. Nurses learn how to read a room the way I do. Residents learn when to drop the book and use their eyes. Hale's mouth curved just a little. Director Quinn, he said, testing the title. You have yourself a job. She blew out a slow breath. Then you had better find me an office that does not smell like old coffee, she said. He laughed, short and surprised. Riley slid the ranger coin back into her pocket and kept Jonah's in her palm. It left a faint circle on her skin when she finally let go. By the time summer rolled around the next year, the ER had learned to breathe differently. On a Wednesday afternoon, the place was busy, but not frantic. The waiting room was half full, the chairs arranged in rough rows instead of the old scatter. A kid with a soccer jersey held an ice pack to his knee. A woman scrolled on her phone, one eye on the television. The automatic doors opened and closed with a soft sigh, letting in brief gusts of hot Baltimore air. Inside, someone had written TMAT schedule in block letters on the whiteboard above the nurse's station. Underneath there were times and names, small arrows, and a cartoon drawing of a stick figure in a helmet. In the education room off the main hall, Riley stood at the front with a plastic torso model on a gurney. A half circle of new residents faced her, some with arms crossed, some with notebooks ready. The first 60 seconds after impact, she said, tapping the model's chest, are the golden minute. You do not have time to argue with yourself during that minute. You have time to choose what will kill the patient fastest and go after that first. A resident in the front row raised his hand. What if we are wrong? He asked. You will be, Riley said. Sometimes. That is why you learn to see a room as a whole, not just a lab result. Is the person talking? Is their skin cold? Is that blood under the blanket or just spilled saline? You make the best call you can with what you have and you move. She stepped back from the model and picked a tall young doctor from the group. You, she said. On here. He blinked. On where? On the floor, she answered. You are going to be our angry relative, 6'2", 200 pounds, not happy his mother is in pain. There was a nervous chuckle from the others. The doctor lay down on the mat beside the gurney, stretching his arms out like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Now stand up and come at me like you want me away from the bed, Riley said. No actual hitting. He hauled himself up and played along, scowling as he stalked toward her. Riley let him get close. Her hands rose open and calm. Sir, you cannot be this close to the sterile field, she said, as if the scene were real. If you take one more step, you put her at risk. He did the step anyway. Riley moved. Grip on the wrist, turn at the elbow, shift of weight. The residents gasped as the taller doctor went from looming to flat on his back in one smooth motion. Riley kept one knee beside his shoulder and one hand near his head, making sure he did not actually hit the floor hard. This is not about hurting people, she said. This is about control. Yours, theirs, the room's. Timat trained security and clinical staff together so that no one's first move has to be a tackle. She stood and offered the doctor a hand up. Again, she said, slower this time. Out in the main ER, Jonah stood with a small group of security guards near the far wall. He wore dark cargo pants and a polo shirt with a St. Augustine badge that looked slightly too small for his chest. In his hands, he held a pair of training cuffs. Rule 1, he told the guards, you talk before you touch. If talking does not work, you touch in a way that lets the person get up afterward without a broken anything. We are not here to win fights. We are here to end them. He glanced through the glass panel into the education room as he spoke. When he saw Riley drop the tall resident a second time, this time even more smoothly, he grinned to himself. In a quiet corner near the staff lounge, a small plaque hung on the wall. It was nothing fancy, just brushed metal and 2 engraved names. No unit insignia, no dates. Under the names it read, for the ones we could not bring home. Riley stopped there between trainings. She rested 2 fingers lightly on each name, then leaned her shoulder against the wall for a moment. The hallway noise washed past. Voices rolling carts' distant monitor beeps. I'm still working, she said under her breath, just in a different uniform. Her old Ranger Challenge coin sat on a narrow ledge under the plaque. Someone had polished it once, but the edges were still scarred. Riley left it there. It was where it belonged. In her scrub pocket, she carried only 1 coin now. The metal circle Jonah had made warmed under her palm as she pressed her hand against her leg. She traced the letters with her fingertip. Stay, Director Quinn. She turned. Dr. Hale stood a few feet away, a chart tucked under his arm. His hair had more gray in it now, or maybe she just noticed it in the brighter light. Training going well, he asked. They are not falling on their heads anymore, she said. So that is progress. He smiled, and for once it reached his eyes. They listen to you, he said. They listen to the beeping, she replied. I just translate. A voice cut in from the overhead speaker. Attention, ER. Incoming level 1 trauma. Adult male mid-30s, highly agitated. Possible weapon police request medical hold. Security reports, difficulty maintaining control. The words landed like a small stone dropped into water. Ripples spread along the nurses' station. Heads lifted. Someone swore quietly. Haley and Riley both glanced toward the entrance. The automatic doors slid open as if on cue, then closed again, framing the empty space where the new arrival would soon stand. Riley reached up and gathered her hair into a tight knot at the back of her head. The simple motion drew a line between one version of her and another. I will take this, she said. You sure? Hale asked. Yicked. I have had practice, she answered. She slipped her hand into her pocket and closed it around the stay coin. The familiar weight settled her spine. At the nurse's station, a tech started to stand. Want security with you? He asked. Riley nodded toward the hall where Jonah and the guards were finishing their drill. They are already moving, she said. If I do my part, they might not have to touch him. She walked toward the front of the ER. Her steps were unhurried. The noise of the department pulled back slightly as if the building itself were waiting. Outside through the glass, she could see the flash of police lights painting red and blue streaks over the pavement. A squad car door opened. 2 officers stepped out with a man between them. His shoulders were tight, his head jerking in small, agitated motions. The automatic doors whispered open. Riley took her place just inside the threshold where hospital tile met city concrete. She had stood here many times in the last year. It felt less like a line now and more like a post. Behind her, monitors kept up their steady beeping. Down the hall, someone laughed at a joke in the education room. Somewhere, a child cried because a shot still hurt even when it saved you. "All right," Riley said quietly, more to herself than anyone else. "Let us talk." She stepped forward to meet the new storm at the door. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.